Welcome back to Wellness with Delaney. Today I'm with Dr. Anaiah Christensen. She is a doctor of chiropractic and she has a really awesome perspective when it comes to physical, mental, emotional healing and how they all tie in, especially when it comes to having a faith and living a spiritual life. Dr. Anaiah, thank you so much for coming on.
Hi. Yes, thank you so much for having me, Delaney. Love to see all your content, how you're changing the health paradigms, and I'm excited to be on this platform, hopefully contributing to the space, and hopefully we all learn a little something today.
Oh, I know I'm going to learn a lot. Even just doing research on your page and your practice, I was like, there's so much that I don't know that you share. And I'm so excited to get into it because I know that this is something that, like, anytime I can find something where I don't know anything about it, I'm
Mm-hmm.
so excited. I'm like, I can't
Yep.
wait to learn. So, can you give me just a brief overview of your practice, what you do in your industry?
Yes, so I am a chiropractor, but I am an applied kinesiologist chiropractor with specializations in clinical neuroscience. So chiropractic, as everyone knows it, you might have seen TikToks or, the rack and crack kind of chiropractors. I'm not that kind of chiropractor. There's lots of different types of techniques within chiropractic, and one of them being applied kinesiology. And so applied kinesiology, founded by Dr. George Goodhart, essentially found that you could use different reflexes that would be contributed to different organ points or nervous system pathways. And you can actually get insight and gain insight into those systems through a manual muscle test. So there's a lot of different understandings about what a muscle test is. This isn't a subconscious test. It's not a truth detector. You can't do yes. It's not a yes or no. So people are typically familiar with a muscle test from like pendulums or, oh, like I do sway tests or I do this test. It's not that kind of muscle testing. It's a very neurologically based muscle testing acting as a biofeedback to gain insight in how the nervous system is responding to its environment in real time. And so Dr. George Goodhart created this technique, and it's been expanded upon for the last bit of time here. And so we've gathered it's osteopathic and it's traditional Chinese medicine, and then this muscle testing, and then the neurology, all kind of compiled into one system. So that's my main system that I use in my analysis and in how I treat my patients. And so that's kind of the framework of the applied kinesiology. On top of that, I love studying clinical neuroscience. So I'm currently pursuing my diplomate in clinical neuroscience, which is nationally recognized not only within chiropractic, but then with also medical doctors, naturopathic doctors, osteopaths, etc. And so I love neuroscience and how it connects all those pieces within the applied kinesiology um, uh, group. And so that's kind of where I'm at now in my practice. So I utilize those concepts and that framework in order to be able to look at my patient and analyze and then treat. The patients I see are typically intense neurology cases. So they're coming in with dysautonomias in which their sympathetic and parasympathetic systems are out of whack and they can't interpret reality well. And it becomes, and it happens that they just get this internal chaos. And so they get gut issues, they get anxiety, they get depression, they are more susceptible to illnesses, emotional disturbances with the limbic brain. So I'm dealing with mostly that particular demographic, as well as people who just want to get healthy, moms, kids coming in wanting to do personalized nutrition plans that way, again, we're doing through the muscle testing and through these different organ reflex points. But my favorite demographic to treat would be these kind of more intense neurology patients that just have all these symptoms. They've gone to all the doctors. No one can tell them what's going on, or they say it's all in their mind. Those are my favorite patients. And then I also work at a addiction and rehab facility. So I'm working with that demographic as well, which is kind of more of like mission work for me. It's really just a great place to be able to pour in and then bringing in this very unique type of chiropractic into that. And so chiropractic for me is nervous system work. So I'm a doctor for the nervous system. That's how I identify within my practice space.
That's really cool. So you're not really focusing on like the posture as much, correct? As like a crack your back kind of chiropractor.
So I want to distinguish that I don't like to, when I'm talking about health or wellness or chiropractic, I try not to like separate things. So I think that's one of the things that we fall into is like, oh, like, oh, so you don't do with posture or do you not adjust? So I still am dealing with posture, but it's not necessarily like what I'm aiming towards. And so when I'm looking at the body through the neurology and through the traditional Chinese medicine viewpoint, and also from the spiritual viewpoint of, our life expression as humans and going through this journey as humans, hoping humans, as I should say, is that uh, it's all together. And so as we're doing one thing with the neurology, it's going to be affecting the posture. And so your different areas of the brain are going to deal with posture. And so ultimately you can be affecting posture, but it's not necessarily my aim. And it's the same with pain. And so lots of people think or associate chiropractic with, oh, back pain. But my aim is not always to get rid of someone's pain. My goal is to get them interpreting reality through the nervous system in a more correct and efficient way. That way their brain and body can self-regulate and they can experience life better. And then pain, getting rid of pain should just be a byproduct of them experiencing life with more clarity. The same thing with posture. Posture is just a byproduct of an organism working more efficiently within its shell.
Gotcha. Really cool. Okay, this is a really cool practice and not one that I know
Yeah.
much about, so I'm pumped about this. I would love to hear a bit about your story. I know that you have experienced some dysautonomia, and now
Mhm.
obviously you work in that. I would love to start kind of with your journey, and then we can get into, signs and ways that people might know that that's them. But so what
Mhm.
happened with you?
So I grew up in sports. I was always very athletic. Kind of a crazy kid, always jumping off things, always wanting to wrestle boys, thinking I was unstoppable, and played sports through high school. I would say I had concussions. I surfed. I grew up in Hawaii, so I surfed. We were always cliff jumping. Like I had injuries, but I kind of just you push through, and it wasn't until later in undergrad I was running track and field, and I had a surfing accident where I got a concussion, and I really didn't connect the dots, but I started experiencing all the cervical pain in my neck, to where I literally would hold my neck up in class, which I
Wow.
know now is it's called rest sign. It's essentially a severe cervical instability or possibly a fracture, which I never went and got diagnosed or anything. I just was in all this pain. I stopped doing track and field. And then I was just all in all this pain. I ended up getting connected with these two chiropractors at a gym opening that I was going to be helping with. And these two chiropractors came and sat next to me. They were like, "Hey, what's your story?" I told them what I was going through and how I had all this pain. Again, I had really not related it to that one surf accident, but that was probably what it was. But anyway, so that was kind of the start of when I started to feel like, oh, I'm not unstoppable anymore. Things are affecting me. And so that kind of was able to get, I don't want to say like fully healed, but integrated in a way where I was able to do life and I wasn't really thinking about those symptoms anymore. And then I decided to go to chiropractic school through that journey. And at that point, I really only knew chiropractic as what most people know chiropractic is, which is adjusting the spine as a way to influence the nervous system. And the school that I went to in Georgia, which is Life University, the best chiropractic school there is, they really emphasize vitalism, which is the power that made the body heals the body. The body doesn't need any help, just no interferences. And so I really identified with the philosophy. I went to chiropractic school. And then while in chiropractic school, I was in a very moldy, like severely black mold, toxic environment in my apartment, and which I couldn't get out of. It was like I was trying to tell these people, like, hey, I need to get out of this place or refunded. Like, this is not healthy. Anyway, I was in that environment for 9 months, and that was also during COVID. So had COVID, which most people know that there's a lot of dysautonomia cases post-COVID. So I had the black mold, and then I had the COVID, and then I had just this sequela of events and illness after that. So I went from being pretty athletic, working out every day, CrossFit, being able to hold up in all my classes, to really not being able to tolerate really anything in life, from smells to interactions with other people to, even getting adjusted. I could no longer get adjusted. I was in chronic pain, chronic brain fog, fatigue, and I didn't know it at the time that it was a dysautonomia, or that was, because COVID was new. We didn't really know what were some of the effects of COVID, but along with the black mold and then the COVID, I ended up getting dysautonomia, to where I also developed POTS, which is postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome. And that's when your heart rate will spike when you go from different positions. So from a lying down to sitting to standing. So mine would go from like 60 to 150, just from a sitting to standing. So you can imagine really any movement would throw off my whole autonomic system. And so everything became difficult. Even walking, like a mile walk, became almost impossible. I really just slept, went to class, slept some more. And that was my life for like 2 years, until I came across neurology, and also getting more into the applied kinesiology. And I started getting treated by a clinical neurologist chiropractor. And that gave me insight into what I was experiencing. And if anyone's familiar with POTS, you do a tilt table test. And so you can actually use the tilt table for treatment. So I was doing tilt table treatments for 6 months, where all I was doing was being on a tilt table, and then slowly getting me up to vertical, where I could actually tolerate that postural shift. So that's kind of where I was at. That was the tail end of chiropractic school, which now would have been a year ago. So I'm a year out of that. So now I've been getting treated more with the applied kinesiology, and now I'm getting targeted all of the nutritional deficiencies, all of the fungal and parasitic or pathogenic overload that because my body was in a weakened state, I was more susceptible to these pathogenic loads, which my body couldn't fight off. So now I'm kind of in more of a cleansing phase, and it's really great to have my body back, my brain back, so I can do things like this. And then now I also have the knowledge and hopefully the insight to help others on that journey.
Wow.
That's kind of a long-winded story.
But no, congratulations on being on, the up and up end. And I love to see when people's practices come from a place in their own life, because there is just a deep connection. So that's always my favorite thing. So with dysautonomia, what are some signs that somebody should look for to indicate that that might be them?
So with dysautonomia, it's again the disorganization between the autonomic nervous system. So everyone knows your sympathetic and parasympathetic. Sympathetic is going to be your fight or flight mechanism. It's very reflexive. And then your parasympathetic is more associated with rest, digest, the vagus nerve, which is like a big buzzword. Everyone loves the vagus nerve and wants to know how to be able to integrate it or activate it. But again, going back to what I had mentioned earlier about segmenting things too much, I think oftentimes we segment the sympathetic and parasympathetic as like they're battling against each other, and like, oh, boo, sympathetic, we don't like it. But that's not really the case. What we really want is to find balance. So the brain is always trying to work in shifts, and it should be this sense of flow where it can bounce off each other. And so it works off of oscillation. So it's not just like, oh, this is high and this is low. There's this kind of oscillation where they're kind of communicating together. And so with dysautonomia, again, it's this sense where the two sides aren't communicating. So you'll get stuck in a particular state. And you can get stuck in both the sympathetic state, where your heart rate is really high, and you get, elevated blood pressure, and you get more sensitive to noises, and you're on high alert. You can also get stuck on the parasympathetic side, which would be associated with, maybe a low cortisol state, in which you can't react to life, in which you're kind of just, so it's not just one or the other, but it's how are they communicating, and are they is the brain able to interpret life and the environment correctly? And so some of the symptoms someone might be experiencing is one, the big heart rate changes, and that would be the POTS again through postural change. Someone would be experiencing possibly headaches or migraines. They could be experiencing pretty much any kind of concussion symptom. So concussion symptoms being light sensitivity, sound sensitivity, even sensitivity to touch. And so really, you can kind of say anything could be related. Cognitive changes. Also very important for women, specifically, dysautonomia is more common in women, and that has to do also with our hormonal changes. And so our estrogen is inflammatory. And so if we had hormonal imbalances prior to injury, it makes us more susceptible to dysautonomias, and then dysautonomia will also make you more susceptible to hormonal imbalances. So hormonal imbalances would be key to look at too. So looking at your cycle, are you properly ovulating? Mood swings. So some of the dysautonomia patients that I work with, majority of them are female. Most of the challenge that we're finding with treating the patient over term is the luteal phase, which is that week or 10 days prior to menstruation, and then during menstruation, because that is when they'll have the tendency for estrogen to peak. And if they don't have that proper balance between the progesterone and estrogen, they will have flare-ups of their dysautonomia. So that's another thing to look up. So look at is when everything gets worse during the cycle. That could also be a symptom of dysautonomia. To continue, you could also have gut issues, like I had mentioned with my own personal state, is you're going to be more susceptible to pathogens. The gut-brain barrier becomes affected, so you become more sensitive to more foods you could eat, now you can't eat, or it causes bloating. So again, you're kind of looking at like a really big picture, and this is why so many of these clients and people coming in are just kind of swept under the rug in the maybe modern medical system, or the traditional medical system, I should say, because it's so broad that they don't really have ways to influence it quite yet from the Western medical paradigm. But for chiropractors, because we're looking at the whole system, we say it doesn't really matter because we're still going to fix what we find. So whatever you as the individual is coming in with, we're able to just analyze you, and we're fixing what we find on you as the individual. And that's kind of how we're shifting the dysautonomias. But that's kind of, again, really broad dysautonomia, but that's kind of the problems with it, is that it comes with all these different things.
Really cool. And then once somebody does, I don't know the term, like what I say, go into remission or heal or just kind of rectify the issues, are they more susceptible to ending up with dysautonomias again, or is it kind of like once they're good, they're good?
So this is where we dive into the complexities of just the neurology itself. And so there's this idea of, nerves that fire together, wire together. And so we have the ability to plasticize new pathways at any time in life. You can build new neural connections, and it's really cool. If anyone's not seeing what this looks like, look up on YouTube like neurogenesis and nerves creating new pathways. It's so beautiful, and it's amazing. You can do it at any time in life, from when you are growing in the womb to on your deathbed. And so the brain will find consistencies or patterns that seem the most efficient, and then it will essentially build into those patterns to solidify them. And so what happens when you have an injured brain, either from mold toxicity or for mold toxicity where the neuron actually begins to eat itself in the myelin sheath, which is the protective layer around the nerve, becomes more degenerative. Also with concussions, where you just have an area that gets injured. So during that time of injury, the brain has to figure out how to adapt around that injury, so that way you can keep going through life. So this is why when people get, say, a concussion when they're younger, they don't really think too much about it, because their brain is young and is able to build these new connections pretty fast and pretty quick. But the area might have never gotten actually healed. The brain just adapted around it. So later in life, and this was in my case, you have a big enough event that causes enough distraction where the brain isn't able to adapt, and then it gets stuck. And so I had that mold, which kind of triggered my old concussions that really never seemed like a problem, but they had never really been resolved. And so when we're looking at dysautonomias, we're looking at both, well, we want to know what tissue, if there's actually damaged tissue in the brain, how can we begin to encourage the area to heal? So that's when we look at nutrition. I use a lot of frequency medicine, as well as red light laser technology in my practice. That way we can actually influence the tissue itself to regenerate. And so that is really incredible. The second part is, well, we have to build the pathways again that are efficient and actually going to be contributing to that organism being able to respond to life appropriately. I say organism as like a general term because obviously humans we're working with, but when you get into the science that's expanding around the frequency medicine, as well as the way that we look at the brain, they do a lot of studies with organisms and how, in general, how organisms, how they adapt to space and how they organize themselves to space. So our cells act as little organisms, interacting with space and responding to that environment. And so it's the same with our nerves. And so if we can get the tissue to heal, then we can start regrowing those pathways. And that's through the very specific functional neurology, which is the brain rehab, where we're building those pathways. If we can build those pathways, and we're slowly going to be hopefully increasing the neurological flexibility, which is the ability for the brain to go back and forth between stressful states and restful states. And if we can get those patterns to stick, then the goal is that person can go out in life and then they have that the plasticized pathways to be able to keep responding to life. So typically we'll see that there's this improvement, but there is always the case that that person gets, say, a concussion again, or something traumatic happens, emotional, physical, chemical, and it could spike these symptoms again if that tissue never fully heals. And so the brain is amazing at adapting. As a chiropractic neurologist, we're trying to get the brain back to its adaptable state and hopefully back in alignment with its original blueprint. But there is always a case that we don't fully heal that tissue, that damaged tissue. So there's kind of these relapses that can happen within that. That hopefully that got at your question. So yes, There is hope, but there's always a case of getting injured again and things kind of coming back again with the hormonal stuff. It's really big where you see spikes. They'll be fine until their luteal phase and they'll get all of their symptoms again.
Gotcha. Yeah. Okay. Then you're mentioning the neurogenesis and how it starts, it can be as young as infancy all the way to your deathbed. Here's something that I'm curious about your perspective as somebody who works so closely in the field of neurology and as a doctor yourself. What impact do the words we speak to ourselves and the thoughts we think about ourselves actually have on our body from a scientific level?
That's a great question. And this is a question I get a lot at the Addiction Rehab Center. I teach classes there on the emotions. And if people are familiar, the body keeps the score. So how our bodies perceive emotions and memories and how we actually hold on to those states. And so the brain really can't tell the difference between what's imaginary and what's real. And so it's all about what's consistent and what's ingrained. And so really when we're talking about words and what we're speaking into existence, it's really changing the way our brain is perceiving reality. And so when you speak a particular thing into existence, your brain is going to say, oh, this thing must be important. So then it builds salience, which is more attention to that thing. And you'll actually begin to see more of that in your reality. And so when you're talking about words that you're speaking over yourself, to keep it really simple, if you're speaking negative words over yourself, or maybe you're projecting oh, this is bad, it's going to happen, or worry, if you're always worrying or becoming anxious about the future, those things actually begin to manifest, or you begin to perceive them in that way. And so there's different parts of the brain that deal with, how you're perceiving reality. But that's in a very general way, your brain begins to shift to perceive what you're putting out. And so as we're working, within the addiction rehab realm, there's a lot of attention to that, because a lot of it comes to, what that's been spoken over them, these kind of ingrained emotional concepts that become patterns and then trigger responses. And so, they back when they were studying responses and like conditioned responses, they Pavlov's dog, where you give the dog a treat and you ring a bell, and then the dog is salivating, and then you get to the point where you only have to ring the bell and the dog salivates. They did the same thing with they took a bunny, and they showed a baby a bunny, and they did a loud noise, and the baby cried. And then they took the white bunny, and then they took say a white cotton ball, a cotton ball at the very end, and they associated the cotton ball again with the loud noise, and the baby cried. And then the baby only had to see the color white, and they would cry without any loud noise. And so you have these associations that are learned through time and through experience, and then your brain begins to shape threat detection based off of those experiences. Even if the something white or like a white cotton ball isn't harmful, the brain has this emotional memory of association with that loud noise, with the bunny when it was a baby, right? And then it's shaped this reality that's now so separated from the original context. And so when we're getting into, again, with words or triggered responses and emotional states that maybe people find themselves stuck in, the brain has essentially created a story in order to understand reality. And sometimes they get so diluted that you actually lose context of reality altogether. And that's how PTSD forms. That's how, these triggers form. And so really when you're dealing with words, what you're affirming into life, it's in simple ways, your brain's going to attune to what you're speaking, but then it also gets into more than just words, but actually emotional reality and, emotional events through someone's lifetime.
Okay, here's why I find this so fascinating. Like I'm obviously, being a believer, really believe that the Bible validates science and the Bible validates anything that's true, because I see the scripture as the truth, and everything else you measure against that to see how true it is. And the Bible says there's power of life and death in the tongue. And it's quite literal. So I've learned lately that it's so important to speak life over myself and to speak life over others. And I've been trying to be more disciplined about that, because I can even go through phases, let's say with body dysmorphia. How often do people look in the mirror and say, oh, I look fat, or oh, if guys, maybe I look too small, whatever. And they say it over and over. And no matter what they actually look like, that's what they believe about themselves. And that's what they're creating. And then I even wonder, would that have a physiological effect on your inability to lose weight if you're constantly telling your body it's fat? I don't know, but I find it so fascinating.
So that's a really great point. One, with the biblical premise, you're absolutely right about that. Is there's truths within the Bible that somehow correspond into all these other dimensions that we're experiencing in our life. And a lot of people say, well, the Bible doesn't have answers for everything. Like, what about this or what about that? And it's like, well, no, it doesn't have maybe your specific answer to that very specific question. But I love to look at the Bible as like a fractal map. So when you think about fractals, it's self-similar patterns that are replicating themselves through different scales. And so the Bible acts as this kind of this map of how we can view life through the micro and macro scales from kind of these patterns and then symbols. So you're absolutely right. Like this is something I really geek out on, is when I study neurology, I always end up coming back to theology and philosophy, because it's just so intertwined into each other. So that's just my little side note. But and I'll add this also. Read the Bible, and when it says like the Bible is the living word of God, when you really begin to shift your mindset to this Bible is alive, this is the living word of God, and then you look at it through the lens, that fractal lens, where it's okay, this is somehow symbolically a cosm of like the entire universe within, because it says Christ is the word of God. And so in a sense, the word is this symbolic and also real representation of eternity and God in material form. And so when you begin to read the Bible through that lens of this is kind of giving me this blueprint of how everything works. You begin to just read, you pick up so many different really cool correlations to life and to healing, and you realize like, oh wow, like the Bible actually does have all the answers. So that's just my little encouragement, or challenge, I should say, and it really changed my faith and walk with Christ. But anyhow, going back to your second part, which you mentioned of the emotional side and how when we speak these words over us and how, oh, maybe it can actually lead to not being able to lose the weight that you want, or maybe not healing. This dives into a particular technique that I do. It's called neuro-emotional technique. And what it does is it helps the body to process emotional stress. And so when people say they want to shift into something new in life, say like losing weight or getting healthy, healing, they have to be congruent with that new pathway, because for so long they've been congruent with the old story. And so through the neuro-emotional technique, and we use muscle testing as well as acupuncture meridian pulse points, and we're actually activating the physiological response that's tied into these patterns of, say, of fear of never getting better, of feeling stuck, like I'm never going to heal, or the sense of the belief that I'm never going to be beautiful or I'm never going to be fit. And so what we do is we take those concepts or belief systems and we see what part of the physiology is stuck into that mechanism. And so again, we use the acupuncture pulse points, and each pulse point correlates with different organ systems and different emotional states. And so we can kind of trace to see what specific emotions are locked into the paradigm of, losing weight. And so in order to lose weight, you have to be okay with losing weight. So we go through this system of, it's called Surround the Dragon. So if we're going to use the example of losing weight. So, okay, I'm okay with losing weight. It is good for me to lose weight. It is safe to lose weight. Oh, it goes weak. Okay, well, why is the physiology? So when the muscle test goes weak, it's just a sign as a biofeedback that the physiology is in a sense stressed, and it has like some type of alert where it's like, oh, we don't like something here. So when we say these concept phrases, it is safe to lose weight, and your arm goes weak. Well, why is the physiology responding to that particular mechanism? And why is there something about that that's a threat? And so then we investigate into these things, and we surround the dragon, get all those cleared, and then hopefully we come back to a state where the person is now congruent with both the negative aspects and the positive aspects. So I'm okay staying the way that I am. You have to be congruent with what you what you're leaving behind. You have to be congruent with what you're leaving behind in order to also move forward. So and a lot of people forget about that. So when it comes to mindfulness and affirmations, a lot of people are always focused on, oh, I'm going to look at the future and I'm going to say like, I'm going to be rich or I'm going to be skinny or whatever it is. But they never actually find that safety within what they're trying to leave behind. And you have to do that equally as much as looking forward. So yes, there's definitely ways to get at clearing those emotional states, and they definitely do affect your physiology, and they will keep people stuck. So that's kind of one of the ways that we do it. There are other ways to get at the emotional side of things, but that's just what we use in practice.
Okay, this is so cool. And I'm totally okay, quick story, because this is like
Yes.
making me think of that. And I'm wondering if this is kind of what that is. So last year, around the holidays, my Thanksgiving, my grandpa died. At Christmas, my family's dog died. And I did not, like, I was sad when both happened, but I don't think I ever grieved. And a lot of it is I've
Mm-hmm.
always been a very emotionally stoic person. Not always. Ever since I feel like I had a season where I was super volatile and just
Hmm.
crazy emotionally, and then I shut down. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
I realized I didn't want to be like that. And I think instead of learning how to have healthy emotions, I just stopped letting myself feel deep emotions because I just didn't want to be
Hmm.
crazy. And a lot of
Yeah.
it was I didn't want to be vulnerable around people. So I have a small group through my church, and all the other women will share their lives. They'll cry, they'll hug each other. And I'm always the one kind of like, I'm good, I'm fine,
Yeah.
things are tough right now, but I'll pull through. I don't want to hug, you know what I mean? Never would
Mm-hmm.
cry. I was with these women for 3 years, never once cried.
Hmm.
And so I'm going through all this, I had chronic eczema on my hand that was just really irritating. But then at some
Mm-hmm.
point early this year, so right after the new year, it turned into dyshydrotic eczema to the point where it was
Mm.
unbearably painful, where it'd wake me up
Wow.
all night. So I'm also up at night, not sleeping. I'm exhausted. I haven't grieved. I have all this unprocessed stuff. Anyway, so
Mm-hmm.
one day I finally just broke down. I shared all of it, and everyone was like, oh my gosh, Delaney's crying. That's crazy. But I ended up going to acupuncture. And
Mm-hmm.
my first time on the table, within 10 minutes, thoughts of the family dog just come to me. I hadn't let myself think about him. All of a sudden, I'm flooded with just emotions around losing the family dog. And I'm just
Mm-hmm.
bawling on the table. I had no idea that's what I
Yeah.
was going in there gonna deal with today. I was like, I just want to get my eczema better, right?
Yeah.
So I'm just sobbing on the table. And then after I sob and sob and sob, I just pass out. And I come out of it feeling like there was a weight lifted off my shoulder. Well, I went for 10
Mm.
weeks and eventually I mean, my eczema went away, never came back after years of having it.
Yeah.
Totally gone. But it was so emotional. When I
Mm-hmm.
went in for eczema, I'm like, how did I end up grieving the dog? This is crazy.
Yeah, your story is so great because it's so many stories where people they, have something traumatic happen and then they have these huge shifts in how they're processing stress or life. And then they have a physical symptom that is kind of, it's always been there, don't really know how it's gotten there, why is it getting worse? And then they come in for treatment, say, oh, they coming in for low back. And we end up touching on the emotional side of things and oh, they come back and they're like, oh, like this rash I've had forever is gone, and we addressed emotions, or the low back is gone, we addressed emotions. And so it's so cool, and I'm glad you really brought up the eczema, because it brings into the component of it's what we call a body entry. And so you have both the mind entries where we have concepts that we want to be congruent with, but then there's also the body entries where there's this pain in my shoulder that won't go away. I've been adjusted. I've been to all the doctors and nothing happens. It's just chronic. But we do through testing, we see that there's maybe you go to acupuncturist or someone who does applied kinesiology or someone who looks at these paradigms and it's like, oh, there's an emotion, associated with the shoulder through that organ system, through the organs correlated with the shoulder, these emotions, and then you release them through that work, and then the shoulder pain goes away. And in your case, the eczema, it goes away. And it's just so cool. I mean, I'll get treated. I mean, this is part of my story, is getting neuroemotional technique done on myself and some of the emotional congruence work, and things that I've struggled with forever just went away. And I was like, every time I get treated, I'm so thankful. I have 2 other chiropractors that are amazing that I work with in my office. So we get to treat each other, which is great.
Amazing.
But it's like every time I'm like, this is so cool. Like, this is the coolest thing. Like, this actually works. Like, my mind is blown. Like, I'm doing it with clients and I'm like, okay, this works. But then you experience it and you're like, no, this works. Like, this is real. So yeah, thank you for sharing. I think it's just, there's so many people who feel stuck and don't have the answers, and a lot of times it's this untouched side of that emotional body that is so ingrained, and it affects our physiology and how we're literally expressing in life. And so
yeah, it's so crazy. I would have never believed that something like that could happen until it happened to me.
mm-hmm.
And I was like, well, I can't make this up. I mean, I had
Yeah.
red, bumpy, rashy hand that was spreading.
mm-hmm.
And then one day I didn't. And I'm like, I can't make this up. And
Yep.
I had so much unprocessed grief, which is just so crazy. Man, you are so blessed to just have chiropractors in your network that you can work with each other. I keep telling my siblings, I'm married, but they're single. I keep telling them one of them has to marry a chiropractor. We need just one in the family. Like, please. Like,
Yeah,
someone
tell
marry a
them.
chiropractor.
Yeah, I know. It's so great to have people that even my roommate right now, she's interning with us, and she's great. It's so cool to see her grow, but like we're always working on each other, and it's great. It's a good community. But Life University, if anyone wants to be a chiropractor, they can reach out to me personally. But Life University, that to me is the best chiropractic school. It has the most opportunities to learn these other techniques that I'm talking about. But yeah, definitely, you always want to have a chiropractor in your family, or someone who does naturopath, acupuncture, someone who does that holistic, who does the holistic healing.
Oh,
Yeah, it's a
absolutely.
good addition.
That is the dream. That's what we need to make the dream team. Okay, so tell me
That's a
about
farmer.
that and a farmer. I'm like also a chef.
And a
I'd be okay with
rancher.
like
Yeah.
a good like seed oil free chef.
Yeah.
I would allow
Mm-hmm.
that as well because it's
Yeah.
totally up to me. I get to say. But tell
Yeah.
me about the fractal order and how that plays into your practice.
So this is something that I'm just really uh, only initially diving into. And so I had mentioned earlier this kind of when I was talking about the Bible and how you have these patterns that essentially demonstrate themselves through different layers, different systems, different scales. And that's really what fractal organization is that you have these similar patterns that then are seen at different scales. And so you can analyze a smaller scale through the larger scale, and you can begin to learn and understand the smaller scale through the larger scale. So they've been doing this in quantum physics when studying black holes and protons. They're finding that the mathematics of the black hole is the same, but to a smaller scale, to the electron, or to these smaller atomic particles. And so they're finding that again, these scales can be demonstrated, or these patterns, I should say, are demonstrated at different scales, and you can study one or the other through the other. And so that's really what fractal organization is. Within the symbolic realm, and I haven't, and this isn't like my own discoveries. I should really say a lot of what I've been learning on comes from both the quantum biology physics standpoint, and then as well as the theological, philosophical, symbolic viewpoints. And so I kind of take those two, and then I also say neurology. And so because neurology plays into, that's like my connector piece between like the human expression and then these kind of macro scales of symbolism. But the people that I've been really listening to would be he's an icon artist. His name is Jonathan Pajau. Then you have a cognitive scientist. He is John Vervaeke. I might be butchering these last names. You have Ian McGilchrist, he's also a neuroscientist, and he's done a lot of work with left-right brain hemispheres, as well as the symbolism of the world and how our left and right brain hemispheres kind of, again, it's this kind of fractal hierarchy where we can analyze the world through how the hemispheres work. So those are just a few names. Oh, and I should also say Michael Levin, who does work in biology and epigenetics and the morphological fields or the bioelectric fields. And so those are kind of the main names that I love to listen to. They do a really great job of just having platforms where they're inviting other great voices that are contributing to the space. But my passion is trying to connect that symbolic, theological, philosophical world with the biology and the neurology. And what we're seeing in a lot of these researchers is that they're starting to have to bring them together, or you can only look at biology through some sort of symbolic philosophical lens, and then looking at also theology and symbolism through how biology works. And so everything's kind of meshed together. And so as I've been studying these things and kind of creating these like my own concepts of how, like, why does that matter? Like, why does understanding fractal organization, why does understanding theology in the Bible, why does understanding philosophy and, some of the concepts from Plato and Aristotle, why does that matter for what I do? Why do I need to know that in my practice as a chiropractor? And for me, learning about these perspectives, and especially some of the perspectives behind beauty, resonance physics, these also in truth, like so the transcendentals, beauty, goodness, and truth, those have these fundamental principles that just correlate so closely to biology, self-expression, our expression as humans. I think when I started working at this addiction rehab facility, it became really relevant to me, like this, the sense of the meaning crisis, which is this new kind of crisis they've formulated. Philosophers, what's his name? John Vervaeke, he talks a lot about the meaning crisis and how there's all this knowledge, all this information that's circulating in the field that's exponentially getting greater, but we don't have any meaning really attached to it, or we don't have the wisdom. So it's a bunch of knowledge, but we're not actually integrating into it. And so it's becoming where we're at a health crisis now, where we see so many people who are sick, who are ill, who are sad, depressed, just not living to their fullest potential. And it's not just that they're, oh, they have a diagnosis. And this is where I get on my soapbox. It's not the diagnosis. It's they're a microcosm of the macro scale of the whole environment and systems that are at work in our society. It's you see the sick agriculture and how that plays into the sick human. And so the fractal scale, again, it's just looking at, no, it's not just you, the individual with this diagnosis. It's no, there is an environment that's shaping you. And in order to understand how it's shaping you, you have to also understand the environment and how the environment is suffering. I'll get into a little bit. So beauty is this idea of being congruent with your environment. And so I think it's really cool. You can judge, say, a system or environment by its beauty. You can say, okay, what's the longevity or the longevity of this system? And you can judge it. You judge it intuitively through a system's beauty by analyzing the structural beauty, its integrity. And you do the same thing with humans. And so beauty is not so much this subjective thing, but it's actually this objective truth that emanates through reality. And it's what we've shifted away from that. And so we're in this very analytical framework in society. We do it when we look at a human, we just diagnose them. We do it when we're looking at agriculture, and we do it when we're designing cities. It's all analytical and systemic, or not systemic, systematic. It's just looking at the parts, not the whole. And the beauty first mindset looks at, okay, where are we going as a full system together as a whole? How's each part working into each other? And so when you look at the human through a beauty first mindset, when you look at say agriculture through a beauty first mindset, you begin to get systems that by nature will begin to just replicate, or they will self-maintain themselves. And really the human system is a self-maintaining, self-organizing system. But when we get sick, we stop self-organizing and we stop self-maintaining. And when that happens, that's when we need all these external variants to help sustain us. But no, we're biotensegritous. As humans, we're biotensegritous in nature, which means we should actually get stronger through force and pressure. We shouldn't just become, die off. We should get stronger, and that's how evolution works. And evolution is a sense of just getting stronger through time and adapting. And so when I look at the fractal order, it plays into these concepts of beauty and purpose and meaning, and stepping away from just that purely analytical looking at the parts, but then shifting into looking at the whole and how actually I'm affecting my environment, but my environment's also affecting me. And so you have to look at both when treating a person. And so that was a huge rabbit trail, but hopefully that kind of got at a little bit about what I'm currently learning. And part of why it's all over the place is because I'm still learning about it. But it really excites me, and I really enjoy learning about all of that.
Yeah, it's interesting too, because I think that it provides a really nice framework for stuff that we already know. We already know, at least people, I think, like us and people in this holistic wellness space understand that the individual is part of this larger order, and sickness. Even I always say beauty is a mirror of health, right? All these things we see in ourselves, they're not isolated. They're part of this larger scale, and it goes out and out and out. But I think this provides a really nice framework for people to understand it. and kind of tie it up. So I'm excited to see how the research progresses that and how you learn more and share more hopefully on that, because I find it super fascinating. Okay, before we run out of time, I would love to know, what are your personal favorite health hacks?
Ooh, that's a good one. Oh, there's so many. um, I'll say one because it's right here on my desk. This is homeopathic sprays. And so through the neuroemotional technique, we use these remedies. And so this one is ER 911 because I figured I might be a little anxious. And so I had a few sprays underneath my tongue. But that's a great way as far as the emotional shifting. It's almost like a way to just shift that energy dynamic into a more congruent state. So that's NET sprays. That's just one little hack. Other hacks, I mean, the real basic ones, but they're so fundamental and amazing, is, sunshine, eating well, but beyond that, enjoying the things that you do. And so and then not doubting yourself, not doubting the things that you're doing. And this comes back to a biblical premise in Corinthians where it talks about food and like, oh, don't judge your brother for eating this food. Within your own conscience, like don't doubt yourself. And it says that anything done without faith is equated as sin. And when I initially read that, I was like, whoa, like I am so sinful because I do everything in doubt. I don't do anything in faith. I'm living in fear. And this was really when I was in the peak of my illness. I just feared everything. I didn't have any faith in what I was allowing into my life. And then that's what it says, don't doubt what you approve into your life. And so anything I was eating, I would just doubt, oh, this is going to make my tummy hurt, or I'm going to feel terrible, or food doesn't like me, or, oh, I'm going to go on this walk, but I'm going to feel bad, or I want to do this, but what if I don't like it? And we let doubt to come in to all these bits in our life, and it's going to steal our joy. It's going to steal our vitality. So really making that shift, I would say this is the best health hack you can do ever, because nothing else matters. Really, nothing else matters. If you aren't living in congruence and in faith with what you're allowing into your life, because ultimately you have choice, you're allowing it. If you're living constantly in fear and anxiety over the food you eat, over not eating seed oils, that is causing more illness than not. And honestly, my hardest patients are also the healthiest patients. So the people that are eating the cleanest, the people who are meditating, the people who are exercising, those patients are my sickest patients. And oftentimes they have these stress responses, or they're not actually living. They're not living in joy when they eat their grass-fed finished steak. It's not a sense of like true gratitude and like receiving that food as going to be nourishing, but they have fear even over those things. And I had that in my life, and I had to really like, okay, Anaiah, like you can't be judging everything in your life, because that's going to judge you right back, and it's going to become a weight and a burden. And so that would be my number one health hack is don't doubt what you approve in your life. Have faith in everything that you're choosing. If you're going to make a choice, have faith. Don't doubt yourself. And go in life with that security and groundedness. And that would be my number one health hack.
I think that's
and
beautiful. Yeah, I think that's absolutely beautiful. I love this idea, and I resonate with it a lot. Even now, I feel like, and maybe you're the same in this, but health is never an arrived moment, right? You're never fully there. It's a journey, especially when you get to enjoy the journey. It is kind of fun, and I think for me, it started with questioning the COVID vaccine, and then led to where I am now, basically. I mean, there were other things in that, but that's really what led to the holistic movement in my life. And even now, okay, so I decided one day, I texted my husband, I was like, I feel convicted to throw out all of my activewear and buy a whole new activewear wardrobe. And then I'm looking at the prices for nice, clean activewear, and I'm like, oh, all right, we're doing this. Like, let's just drop a couple
It's a
$1,000s.
commitment.
Yeah. And I'm like, I work out all the time. I live in activewear. So, I mean, yeah. So I'm in this place now, even where I threw everything out and only a couple of my pieces have arrived. So I'm just wearing the same thing over and over.
Yep.
But I was like, I realized there was this point where I was feeling anxious about my polyester, like cute, whatever activewear, super cute, looks great on. But I just had this weird anxiety about it. And I was like, okay, well, I can either feel this way and wonder what it's doing to my body, specifically to my progesterone, or I can just get rid of it. And I swear I feel like so much peace of mind about it. I don't even miss the money. It's like this weird, like, I put it on and I'm just like, yes. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Like,
It
there's
feels
that, like,
right.
yeah, like self-assuredness. And I think when you, with that framework, there's also, if something is making you feel that way, make a decision. You know, you can also decide to not allow that in your life anymore.
Yeah.
And, but with that being said, it's like, I'm always like, you have to either let it go or you do something different. But either way, you have to find resolution for yourself.
Yeah, indecisiveness is, I think, one of the main contributors to just falling into disorder. And it's the same way in our minds, and going back to the fractal understanding, it's the same way in our cells. When our cells can't make a decision or when they can't organize appropriately, it leads to chaos. That's how cancer cells form. Is a cell becomes rogue. It begins to think it's in competition to everything else. It wants to fight all the other cells. It doesn't feel like it's a part of the whole, and then it begins to do its own thing. And same thing with autoimmunity. And so these emotional states, it corresponds to how our cells have their own minds and how they're actually reacting. And so, yeah, indecisiveness, having clarity, yes and no's, it's more meaningful and more impactful on our health than I think what we understand and fully give it credit for.
Yeah, and like discernment, when people get convicted, they just need to act fast. People wait so long to act. I'm like, honestly, when that Holy Spirit conviction comes on you, act now, think about it later. Like that, you know what I mean? I just think that your life is so much easier when you trust. And that comes with also like reading the word, spending time with God, knowing yourself, knowing the voice of God. But when you're sure in those things, you don't waste time ruminating. You get the word and you act. Okay, before we run out of time, I would love to know, because I love asking the experts, what is your current health and wellness goal?
My current health and wellness goal. So I think going along with the dysautonomia, I'm still kind of in that journey. And for me, my biggest difficulty or hill, I should say, is exercise still. So being able to run, I still really have a hard time. Like my brain just finds it really stressful to do any kind of running.
Yeah.
I would really love to do a sprint triathlon. That's one of my physical goals. That's a physical goal. As far as wellness, I think, really just tagging on the health mindset of living through faith and not fear. That's kind of like my personal slogan, I guess. It's just, I've struggled with anxiety. I used to struggle a lot with anxiety and this fear mindset. And so I think just that continual opening to faith and actually what that means in my life. Because really, you can, Paul says this, you can exercise your physical body, but if you're not exercising your spiritual mind and body, then there's not really any point to the physical. And being sick, when I was really sick, it made me recognize the value and also the correlation between my spiritual health. So I would say just continuing to embrace life fully would be my health and wellness goal, because life is so wonderful and it's also full of sorrow, but that's what makes it beautiful. And again, going back to this idea of beauty, it's beauty isn't just symmetry. I think we just think of it as symmetry, but really something beautiful is something that finds coherence within the chaos around it. And so that is I would say my personal health and wellness goal, because for me it's deeply spiritual, is to allow my beauty to find coherence with whatever God brings me in my life, whatever chaos surrounds me, whether that's sorrow, whether that's joy, that I would just be able to meet life fully without fear.
That is a word right there. I love that definition of beauty. That's my brain's
That's
already thinking of all of the ways that
right.
applies. It's beautiful.
So Jonathan, again, Jonathan Pajau, he's the icon artist. He's Orthodox, but he does a lot of this conversation on beauty and symbolism. If you're interested, you got to just go listen to his podcast. It's The Symbolic World. I binge all of his podcasts. He's an amazing thinker. But
Oh, I absolutely want to. Really fascinating. Where can people find you?
So I am mainly on Instagram. So it's Dr. Anaiah DC. No other periods or dots or anything, just Dr. Anaiah DC. You can see my website through my link tree. It's all there. You can reach out to me via Instagram, DM, if you have any questions on dysautonomia, on symbolism, on the fractal stuff. We can have a conversation. Maybe you can teach me something. I'm always open to learning. Or maybe I said something wrong. You can correct me. I always love feedback. But that's how people can reach me. My email, they can also get that through my link tree, through my website, but that's going to be info@dranayahdc.com.
Thank you so much.
Anyways.
Amazing. Thank you. I learned so much from you today. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Blessings over your podcast and what you're doing. And yeah, it's just really great.
Thank you. I received that. Well, you guys, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you so much for listening. Make sure, if you love this episode, make sure to give us a 5-star review. It is a free way to show support to this show, to help us continue to produce episodes for you like this every single week. Until next time, have a wonderful rest of your day.